Hey, this is John, and this is the third video in a series of tutorials teaching you how you can get models, among other assets, into Source Filmmaker. In this video, we're going to be focusing on getting our model here converted into either an SMD or a DMX file, which we need for compiling. So we're going to be using Blender for this, and you can do this in both Blender and 3ds Max. I don't know if you could do it in like Maya, but I know for a fact that Blender and 3ds Max have plugins that allow you to do this. So there's a link in the description where I have the plugin for Blender here. Let me find it, compile tools. And so there's the plugin for Blender, and there's also a link to get the wall worm tools for 3ds Max. That's, it's just the plugin for 3ds Max. But we're going to be focusing on Blender because I found that most people are using Blender for this, as well as I personally use Blender. I don't like 3ds Max. So I'm going to be using Blender. And to install this plugin, there's a README here. It'll teach you how to do that. It's it's pretty simple to get plugins installed into Blender. So once you're in Blender, you've got that installed and you have your model that you want to get in. For example, here's ours, right? And we have a rig in there and a couple mesh parts. And then I've duplicated the head here because this is going to be used as an example later on. Because if I go here, you can see I subdivided it a whole lot. And this is, well, there's a limitation as far as the compiler goes, where per mesh part you can't have more than 30,000 vertices in a mesh part. Or, I'm not exactly sure if that's what they would call it, a mesh part, but I call them mesh parts, right? So this here, is a part of the mesh, it's a different part, they're in different objects, right? So if a certain object is more than 30,000 verts, then the compiler is not going to like it. And you can fix that by splitting it up into different mesh parts. Which you can just grab a few things and then separate the object and then export another SMD or DMX. So let's go take a look real quick at SFM and see what it looks like when it's in there. So here's that model inside of SFM, and you can see that I have a rig in there. It came along just fine. So if we go and we apply the IK rig in SFM, you see that that works. So real quick, I'm going to explain how you can get that to work if you have a rig on a character somewhat like this, just a human biped sort of thing. In SFM, you need to make sure, or in your program, you need to make sure the bones are all named the same as they would be inside of Source Filmmaker. So take, for example, the Scout model, right, from TF2. If you look at his bones and you look at what they're named, you need to take a look at those names, and you need to name the bones on your model correspondingly. So like I have BIP upper arm _L, BIP lower arm _L. That's what they're named on the Scout model. I also have the same number of bones, and the only place it doesn't matter are the fingers. The fingers can be named whatever you want, and you can have as many finger bones as you want. You can also have, other bones, but the main rig, it needs to have a certain amount of spine bones, and the things just need to be named properly. That way, when you apply the IK and SFM, it'll work just fine. So let's take a look at the add-on inside of Blender, which if you go to your properties panel here and you click this right here, the scene tab, we have some options. We have source engine export, and we have source engine exportables. And then down here, we don't really need to worry too much about this, but it has to do with the animation part of it, right? So with this model here, let me just go to my animation layout. I've created this little animation. It's pretty crappy, but we're gonna go ahead and export this with our model, and that's pretty easy to do. So what we're gonna want to do is let's go back to modeling. Take a look at some of the options here. So export path, where is this going? Well, this is basically telling Blender where to spit out the SMD or DMX files once you've exported them. All right. So just find a file path, find where you want to put the files, when they are converted into SMD and DMX. Then right below that, you have the option to choose from SMD and DMX. DMX is usually going to be better. The file size is smaller. It natively supports blend shapes. SMD can do that too, but you need to write out some more stuff in the QC for that. DMX also has less limitations, so usually you want DMX. And then target up axis, since we're in Blender, Z is up, so make sure that's just Z. And then the engine path. This is basically telling the converter here a part of the engine that it needs in order to convert the model into an SMD DMX. And that file path is probably going to be the same as mine, so I'll put it in the description. Basically, you just go to your Source Filmmaker install, and then game, and then bin, and then you just want to accept that as the folder. and that'll work just fine. Material path you don't need to worry about, we take care of that in the QC. And then a nice feature of this plugin is that you don't actually need to, install a newer version if you want to update it. You just click this button right here, check for updates, and then it'll tell you like the latest version is installed, or if it installs a new version, it'll say go ahead and restart Blender. So then below that, we have the source engine exportables. Now you see we have the body, which is, that chunk. We have the helmet, and then we have helmet 1, or helmet 001, that's the one I duplicated and subdivided. So we're going to go ahead and check that. You can, tell it to ignore certain models or whatever by using the checkboxes here. And then I have that animation that I made. So we're going to export all 4 of these things, and this right here lets you put the animation into a subfolder of where you're exporting your SMD and DMX files. Alright, so let's go take a look at where we're putting these. So over here. So here's the folder where I'm going to drop them in. You can see I have a compile file there, and we're going to get into the compiling chunk, of this whole process in a later video. Right now we're just focusing on getting our model into an SMD or DMX with the, the rig and animation and everything. So you'll notice that it doesn't say there's an armature in here. That's fine, don't worry about it. The armature will come with one of the DMX files or SMD files. So that's pretty much everything you need to know to get this set up. So let's go ahead and push export. Oh yeah, real quick, visible layers only. So if you have a bunch of meshes in different layers, which are these things in Blender, you can just do visible layers, and that'll only export the models from the layer that you're currently in. So let's go ahead and export these. Let's do DMX first. So scene export, that'll export all 4 files we have selected. You can also do the one you just have selected, which is the one that would be just above that. So it's going to take a little bit of time here. Give it a second. It'll tell us when it's done. So up here it says 4 files exported in 11.4 seconds, 0 errors, 1 warning. Warnings most of the time you don't need to worry about them, so that's fine. And then we're also going to do SMD because, for example, sometimes DMX won't work when you compile. Now, I don't really know why. The compiler is a little bit dinky, and no one really knows why sometimes SMD is going to work where DMX doesn't. It's strange, but usually DMX works fine. So just in case, we're going to export the SMDs as well. So let's go ahead and see and export all 4 files. Give it a second here. I think that the SMD actually takes longer to convert into. Yeah, it took a little bit longer. So 4 files exported in 15.2 seconds. So we're all set up here. Let's go take a look at our folder where we exported them to, and you can see that all those files got dropped in here right where we told them to be, and then in the subfolder, which we specified, is our animation. So we have everything here basically set up for when we need to do the QC file in the, in a later video. But yeah, we got all our model stuff converted properly into SMD and DMX files. And you only need, DMX or SMD. You don't need both, but I'm doing both just for the sake of this tutorial, because sometimes DMX may not work, and I've set this up in a way that we'll be able to demonstrate that in a later video. So yeah, thanks for watching, and go ahead and like this video, and check out some more videos on the channel, and subscribe. Also, I believe the next video is going to be about VTF files, so we're going to get some textures that go along with this model that you saw in SFM here. We're going to take these textures and we're going to convert them into VTFs. That way we can actually use them inside of Source Filmmaker, and I'm going to be explaining how VTF edit works. It's a pretty simple program, but we're just going to go over it. So that's the next video. Yep, so thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.